A very good evening and welcome to the State of Business, our television's primetime news bulletin. I'm Adusha Palakumar. Let's take a look at tonight's headlines first. President Maithripala Sirisena commences official visit to Seychelles. World Bank Group's regional trade report launched in Colombo.
The story of South Asia. It's the most dynamic region in the world.
Now the stories in detail. President Maithripala Sirisena arrived at the Seychelles International Airport today, commencing a two-day official visit on the invitation of Seychelles President Danny Faure. He was received by Senior Minister Maxuzi Mondon, State Secretary for Cabinet and Public Services Mohamed Afif, Seychelles High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Conrad Mederick, Sri Lanka High Commissioner in Seychelles Tikiri Herath Gunatilaka and other senior officials. The main aim of the President's visit to Seychelles is to increase close cooperation between the two countries in different areas such as tourism, fisheries, health, education and oceanic affairs. Sri Lanka and Seychelles are marking 30 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries, and this visit is likely to pave the way for further enhancement of cooperation between the two Indian Ocean neighbours. Formal diplomatic relations between the two countries were established on 3 October 1988. Launch of the World Bank Group's regional trade report titled A Glass Half Full, The Promise of Regional Trade in South Asia, written by Sanjay Kathuria, was held in Colombo this morning. According to the report, South Asia is the fastest growing region in the world. However, South Asian regional trade is still lower than that of other world regions. The event was attended by Minister of Development Strategies and International Trade Malik Samaravikrama, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, Country Manager of World Bank to Sri Lanka and Maldives Ida Sorai Ridhio and Sanjay Kathuria. Sanjay Kathuria is the lead economist and coordinator of the South Asia Regional Integration in the World Bank's Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice.
The story of South Asia. It's the most dynamic region in the world for the last many years, growing at 7% plus. And yet it is the most disjointed, right? We're not using the opportunities. The share of trade, intra-regional trade as a share of regional GDP, not just intra-regional trade, regional GDP is less than 1%. So it's lower than sub-Saharan Africa, it's lower than any other country, any other region in the world. What's the missing potential? Well, we know that the most prosperous regions in the world tend to trade and prosper. Think ASEAN and East Asia, think Europe, think North America, right? They all trade intensively with each other. And that's a part of their prosperity. It's natural because you're your neighbors, so you should be trading. Well, we know that's not happening in South Asia. The report documents, I think, beyond any credible doubt that as far as economics can go, I think that there is a huge gap between the current trade in South Asia, which is 23 billion, versus the potential of 67 billion. And mind you, this is only goods, this is static, this doesn't include the services, which, if you start including services, then this will be even more. So the 67 billion is also a tip of the iceberg when it comes to trade possibilities within the region. Sri Lanka can more than double its exports to the region, almost get it to 3 billion. And in particular, as Indrajit also said, it is significantly under-exporting to India. Right? That's part of it. And who's suffering as a result of all of this, right? So ultimately, it's the people. Not only trade, but also investment. The report also goes, in the initial part of it, talks about investment. And we know there is a sort of trade and investment are joined at the hip in the modern day world. So even though Sri Lanka is the highest recipient of FDI from within the region, right? It's about half of the total intra-regional FDI is located in Sri Lanka. Most of that is India to Sri Lanka FDI. And yet India is such a huge investor overseas, globally. And Sri Lanka and the rest of the South Asia receive a tiny fraction.
Addressing the gathering, Minister Malik Samaravikrama noted that following cabinet approval, Sri Lanka will sign the coastal shipping agreement with Bangladesh in the near future, permitting access to more ports in East India. Minister Samaravikrama further expressed the government's hope to attract more trade-oriented free trade agreements.
Sri Lanka has a potential to grow its exports to South Asia by more than 2 times. If the right ingredients are worked on, while our current exports to the region are about $1.2 billion. The potential is nearly $3 billion. Going by last year's export numbers, this is about 20% of our total exports. Not an insignificant number, and it will be double of what it is now. The new innovation and entrepreneurship strategy that went to cabinet this week, and it will be taken up at the next cabinet meeting, was in fact developed with technical support from the World Bank. This will spur a whole new era of innovative businesses in our country and add a fresh growth impetus to our private sector. We are making it easier for businesses to trade with the world. The Trade Information Portal was launched a couple of months ago and provides up-to-date information on procedures, institutions, and market data. The National Single Window project is underway and will connect dozens of agencies responsible for trade together in a single digital platform. We have to keep our eye on the big prize, which of course is India. The Indian middle-class consumer market alone is forecast to be about 10 times larger than Sri Lanka's whole population, about 200 million. The government is aware of what needs to change, and on top of that is the non-tariff measures. It is also on top of our list of things we are working on in the ongoing EDCA negotiations. Already, we are working with the Food Safety and Standard Authority India to accredit Sri Lankan labs so that our food and beverage exports to India won't face difficulties as in the past.
Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, says nation-building challenges have led to a serious trust deficit in the South Asian region. On a further note, he pointed out the myths surrounding the Indo-Lanka Free Trade Agreement.
Due to some major nation-building challenges, we've had a significant trust deficit in the region, which has been a great hindrance in terms of promoting regional integration and harvesting the benefits that come from such regional links. But it's interesting that in recent times we are beginning to see progress. I think probably the way that it is being adopted is the correct one, rather than waiting for a grand design in terms of regional integration, and we have SAARC-wide agreements which forge the way ahead. It seems what is happening now is that opportunistically things are moving ahead. Some of the myths that exist on the Indo-Lanka FTA, because there's the general perception that this has not been a success. It has not been as successful as it could have been and should have been, but I think often the initial reaction is our trade deficit has increased. That's all that has come about because of the Indo-Lanka FTA. But if you unpack that, and if you look at trade that has taken place under the FTA, that is trade that has taken place on items that have moved across borders on a preferential basis, then the picture is very different. There have even been some years where Sri Lanka has had a surplus. I must say that was during this Vanaspati period, etc., when there were these arbitrage operations. But all the same, if you look at just the items under the FTA, the preferential trade, you would see that generally somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 or even 80% of our exports to India go across on a preferential basis. On the other hand, India's exports to us, our imports from India, is flipped. They're only about 25% to 1/3 come in on a preferential basis.
Let's take a look at more news after this short break. Welcome back. Sri Lanka's Meteorology Department today warned the naval and fishing communities of the rough sea conditions, although the depression over the Southeast Arabian Sea area is moving away from the country. The Meteorology Department issued a warning to the naval and fishing communities to be vigilant since the possibility of the sea areas off the coast extending from Mana to Hambantota via Puttalam, Colombo, Galle and Mathura being rough is still high, with an increase of wind speeds up to 70 to 80 km per hour, particularly during thunder showers. The Meteorology Department said the depression over the Southeast Arabian Sea is located 1,650 kilometers away from Colombo, and the possibility for very heavy showers or thunder showers and very rough seas, very high winds can be expected in the sea areas within 100 kilometers to 200 kilometers of its location. The depression over the Arabian Sea is very likely to intensify further into a deep depression during next 12 hours and into a cyclonic storm during the subsequent 24 hours, and it is likely to move northwestwards away from Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the prevailing showery conditions are expected to enhance over the island during tomorrow. Showers or thunder showers will occur over most parts of the island, particularly after 2 p.m. Showers or thunder showers may occur at several places in the northern, western and eastern provinces and in the Galle, Mathura and Kaluthara districts in the morning. Heavy falls of approximately 100 millimeters can be expected at some places in the eastern, southern, central, Sabaragamuwa, Uva and western provinces. Now let's take a look at the weekly economic indicators released by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka last Friday. During the period, crude oil prices largely followed an increasing trend. Prices rose to near 4-year high levels due to the prospects of tighter supply amid next round of US sanctions against Iran. However, price increases were limited due to rising US crude inventories and increased crude production from Saudi Arabia and Russia. Overall, both Brent and WTI prices rose by $2.1 per barrel and $1.5 per barrel respectively within the period. The weekly average weighted prime lending rate for the week ending 5th October 2018 increased by 12 bps to 11.86% compared to the previous week. The reserve money decreased compared to the previous week mainly due to decrease in deposits held by commercial banks. The total outstanding market liquidity increased to a deficit of 106.940 billion rupees by end of the week compared to a deficit of 116.663 billion rupees by the end of last week. During the year up to 5th October 2018, the Sri Lanka rupee depreciated against the US dollar by 10.1%. Given the cross-currency exchange rate movements, the Sri Lanka rupee depreciated against the euro by 6.7%, the pound sterling by 7.2% and the Japanese yen by 9.2%, while appreciated the Indian rupee by 3.3% during this period. The Sri Lanka Automobile Association in Japan held their first ever automobile convention in Colombo recently. The convention was graced by President Maithripala Sirisena, members of the Sri Lanka Automobile Association in Japan, business tycoons and government officials. The Sri Lanka Automobile Association in Japan was formed in 2012 with a membership of over 70 Sri Lankan motor vehicle exporters based in Japan. Since then, the association has conducted trade development between Sri Lanka and Japan through integrated programs and has developed a mutual relationship between vehicle dealers and other parties while cooperating with the relevant regulations. Let's see how the stocks performed after this short break. Welcome back. Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a positive note today. The all-share price index gained 24.29 points to close at 5,908.06 and the S&P SL20 gained 27.52 points to close at 3,038.12. The turnover was 265 million rupees and 17.8 million shares were traded. Next is Forex rates. With that, we are wrapping up State of Business for the day. We'll meet you tomorrow with more news at the same time. Until then, take care. Good night.